Cut the cranes from the brass fret and file off all the rough edges. It is important to ensure that the bottoms of the cranes are perfectly flat, as it will make it easier to glue them in place. If you are painting your model, you can leave them on the fret and paint them black, and then carefully cut them and remove them later. Nine hammock cranes are fitted along the rail. Glue each one in place directly above a pillar using superglue. Cut a length of the brass wire about 30mm longer than necessary. Straighten it out and feed it through the holes. Secure the wire to each crane with a drop of superglue. Repeat steps 3 and 4. Add a second wire, then cut the ends off close to the end hammock cranes. Carefully sew one edge of the netting to one of the brass wires. Use a large cross-stitch needle, as this will have a suitably large eye and a blunt point. Take a spare 5mm wide plank and use this to hold the netting in the bottom of the cranes. Trim the netting just above the top of the hammock cranes, making sure the plank is holding it right down at the bottom. Sew the second side to the brass wire and tie off all the ends of the threads around the end hammock cranes. Seal all the knots with diluted PVA adhesive and trim them. Use the parts with stage 73 for the nets along the forward poop deck rail and quarterdeck. Glue 9 9mm cranes on the forward poop deck rail, each directly above a post. Add the brass wire netting in the same way as you have done before. Cut the wires flush with the cranes to clear the area in front of the carronades. Bend the wire for the outer ladder handrail as shown, cut it to length and glue it to the hammock crane. Then fit the netting using the same techniques as before. Lay the grating in place, making sure you don't trap any of the blocks attached to the knight heads. Insert the bowsprit, ensuring it is straight, upright and fully seated. Then remove the bowsprit and grating, apply a little glue to the base of the grating and bowsprit and reassemble. Ensure everything is still straight and allow the glue to dry. Cut a length of 0.8mm black thread about 1 metre long and run PVA adhesive along it to stiffen about 80mm of each end. Feed the ends down through the elongated slots in the grating. Now feed both ends through the slot below the upper dolphin so they cross over inside the slot. Leave one end with a tail of about 100mm on the left side of the model. Using the long end, make about 5 turns of thread around the bowsprit and through the slot. Tie half of a reef knot, then thread the long end through the slot and pull the half knot tight. Feed the long end back through the slot and tie the second half of the reef knot. Feed the short end through the slot and pull it tight. This should form a reef knot inside the slot where it is inconspicuous. Repeat the process for the other side. Follow steps 1 and 2 for adding the topmast pendants on page 530. Follow step 1 for adding the dead eyes to the upper shrouds. Drill out the holes in the foremast top so that the bindings will fit through. Temporarily put the mast in its socket, thread all the tails of the dead eyes through the holes in the top and apply a little PVA adhesive just below the dead eye. Pull the dead eye down into position so that the binding is drawn down into the glued hole. Leave the tail its full length. It will be tied off to the lower shrouds later on, after these shrouds have been secured and tensioned. Repeat this for all 12 dead eyes, 6 for each side, making sure they are all straight and in line. Rig the shrouds above the cross trees and fit dead eyes to the ends, but leave them hanging for now as they will be tensioned after fitting the masts. Once again, the first steps show the topmast. Tie a reef knot around the top mast so that the knot falls on the right of the mast, then cut the other end of the thread to the same length. Repeat steps 1 and 2 in your instruction alternately on left and right sides of the mast until you have 6 threads on each side. Take the brass lantern body and bend it at each marked line. Hold it with pliers and fold it against your finger or your building board. Continue bending the sides until you form a complete octagon. Apply superglue to the joint between the ends of the lantern body and to the base, then put them together, holding the top in place as it makes it easier to align the body and base. If you are painting your model, paint the parts before inserting the yellow shade. Spray the parts with an automotive primer before painting the lamp yellow ochre and painting the wire support black. Trace the pattern for the large lantern shade onto the yellow acetate sheet using a fine felt tip pen, then cut it out. Roll the acetate into a tube and insert it into the lantern. Make sure it sits at the bottom of the lantern and check that the lid fits properly. You may need to trim the top of the shade a little. Glue the top of the lantern in place. If you use super glue, be careful not to fog the shade. Alternatively, you can use the same clear glue used to fix the yellow acetate in the earlier stage. Repeat the same steps to make the 2 smaller lanterns. Store all 3 carefully, they will be fitted to the model later, to avoid the risk of them getting knocked and broken.